Allegiance. Pledge allegiance. Mr. Neely, budget presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I will be presenting the final general fund budget for the 2026-27 school year. As a quick overview of our timeline, we've been working the last several months on the construction of this budget. And tonight we are asking for the board to vote on the approval of the final general fund budget and to set the millage rate for the district for the 2026-2027 school year. So as we've discussed at recent board meetings, we've been working internally to review all budgets to look for ways to reduce the deficit. We've worked with every school and department in that time to use both historical data to support reductions and also to review both new and ongoing initiatives to make sure we appropriately allocate our resources. This is a mindset we will be carrying forward into the next school year as we look during the year for additional adjustments we can make to our actual spending. That said, from where we were in early May at the passing of our proposed final budget until now, we have reduced expenditures by just over $750,000 district-wide. Our budgeted deficit at this moment stands at $6,138,036, as you can see in the lower right corner. As a reminder, consistent with how we passed the proposed final budget and how we've historically presented the budget for consideration, these figures reflect the impact of increasing the budget to the full Act 1 index. A little later in the presentation, I will review other scenarios for the board's consideration at different millage rates. So the next two slides are updates to the expenditure by categories we've been reviewing. Looking first at salary and benefits, these account for $60.8 million in total, which is 70.3% of the overall district budget for next year, and approximately a $1.7 million increase over last year's budget. Within salaries, we of course have various contracts and agreements that determine much of the cost increases we see in this area. In healthcare, we are seeing an 8.3% increase in premiums from the Allegheny County Health Insurance Consortium that is driving that increase, as well as a 3% rate increase to our dental coverage, which falls under the other benefits category. PSERS rates are set by the state, and while they have leveled off in terms of percentages, they do tie directly to salary costs. So as salaries increase, we do see additional PSERS costs. On the non-personnel side, you can again see the breakout by category district-wide. You've heard from department heads and building principals during their budget presentations several examples of price hikes in so many of the things that we do. In spite of that, we still have been able in many areas to limit increases being passed into our overall budget. So in an effort to show that in a different way, I wanted to also use the next slide as a multi-year review of how we've seen certain categories evolve over the last few years within the district. So looking at those same categories from the last slides and their budget for the last 5 years, you can see the far right column showing the average annual increase in this time frame. All categories related to salary and benefits have shown consistent increases in that time. Other areas that have shown consistent increases are driven mainly by things we have less control over. Utilities, for example, have seen a 4.8% average annual increase. We anticipate that continuing to be a concern as energy costs rise everywhere. Our property, liability, and other insurance costs have risen almost 10% annually, and debt service and leases have risen 7.7% as a category. That is an area that, as we progress through construction the next few years, will continue to be closely monitored. Additionally, other purchase services has seen a notable increase that is driven in large part by the tuition cost to private schools within our student support services department that was discussed with the board. But as we look closely at controlling the costs where we can, we have worked internally to reduce expenses in supplies, equipment, and professional services, and minimize expenses elsewhere where possible. So looking at our budget from another perspective, this is a year-over-year view of the budget from the state's function level, which identifies the department or activity an expense directly supports. So I want to highlight first on the right that the 12-month consumer price index from May 2025 to 2026 was 4.2%, showing a benchmark for the increased costs in the economy as a whole. Our overall district budget, as you can see from the bottom row, similarly sits at a 4.2% overall increase in the 2025-26 budget. I think it's also important to review the subcategories listed here. In direct instructional expenses, we are budgeting for a 2.65% increase, and in support services, which encompasses all those areas listed in the center of the chart, we are seeing a 2.99% increase in the budget. So across those two categories combined, the district increase is 2.78%, well below that CPI. The real driver of the budget increase is within our debt service category, which also does include our leases, but is driven significantly by the issuing of bonds to support the campus's construction projects. We have been showing this for the last few years as construction has progressed, but this will be the largest cost driver for the next couple of years for the district, as the additional bonds add to our overall district budget before ultimately leveling off, projected for the 29-30 school year. So since we are on debt service, I wanted again to review this chart, which I hope has become a familiar one, and that shows the projected increase in our bond costs, mirroring what PFM financial advisors have been presenting to the board every time they have provided updates during our bond process. The bond in red is the one that we just issued earlier this year, and the ones in purple and yellow are the additional bonds that, at this time, we anticipate will be required in order to complete the construction projects underway on campus. The numbers at the top there represent the district expenditure budget estimated for these ongoing debt service line items. For another familiar chart, here are those bond costs displayed another way, net of governmental reimbursement, and with the context compared to the value of 1 mil for our district at this moment. So looking only at debt, by the end of 29-30, these projects currently are estimated to cost the equivalent of 3.6 mils in terms of the amount added to the general fund budget. I showed this last month, our departmental budget overview, but following several internal adjustments, I wanted to show the chart again with those reductions incorporated. For most schools and departments, they are now showing decreases in their budget from the current school year. And for the few that are not, we have identifiable reasons why that is not the case, which were presented as part of each group's board budget presentation. While we looked at other areas where we could, these are the areas that were of significant attention as we looked at internal reductions these last several weeks. These are the additional positions that are included at this time within our budget. These are the same positions we have included in prior presentations: 2 teachers, an additional position underneath of student support services, and a restructuring of our technology department staff. Another familiar slide, our high-level review of our revenue sources, with real estate sitting at 58% of our district budget and local sources as a whole making up 72% of that budget. Looking closer at local revenue, within real estate, the millage increase that the board approved last year garnered approximately $1.62 million in additional revenue for this past school year. Elsewhere in local revenue, we have seen interim real estate and real estate transfer tax slow somewhat compared to where they were a few years ago. And for the current year only, we have seen a spike in delinquent real estate tax revenue as Jordan Tax has smoothed over the issues from the previous school year. But we do expect that number to return to more in line with historical trends for next year. Earned income tax, meanwhile, continues to show every sign of continued strong growth. At the state level, Ready to Learn funding has been the strongest source of increased revenue. We have seen smaller increases in other major categories of the governor's budget, basic ed funding and special ed funding, but below what our district's overall budget increase is. For other state sources of revenue, most are tied to reimbursement of different categories of costs, such as PSERS, Social Security, and some smaller initiatives as well. So those are only serving to offset costs elsewhere within the district. At the federal level, we do still have long-term concerns over funding, but we did receive our title funding documents for next school year and are able to report that funding is nearly in line with our current levels for this year. QSCIB reimbursement will also be a concern in future years as those bonds are nearing completion, and those reimbursements will begin to dwindle another couple of years from now. Turning to fund balance, here is our projection of where the district's fund balance sits through the end of the 26-27 budget. We do still project a deficit for the current school year of approximately $3.76 million. And the budget deficit at this time for 26-27 is $6.138 million. This leaves us with a projected fund balance of just over $21 million at the end of next year. Within that, we have various assignments as indicated in the lower half of the slide, and an unassigned fund balance at the bottom listed there of 1.4% of the overall district budget. I've shown our real estate trends previously, so I did want to take a moment on the next slide to look a little closer at some of the township's development and demographics for context purposes. Per U.S. Census data, the estimated population of South Fayette Township in 2025 was 18,648. It is estimated that just over a quarter of that population is under the age of 18, and the district's current enrollment sits at 3,475 as of May. Within the township, there are also an estimated 6,880 total households, 4,925 of which are what are called approved homesteads. For those not aware, homesteads are defined as owner-occupied primary residences. Essentially, that means these are the residential taxpayers and homeowners who live in the township as their primary residence. They do, as you'll see on the next slide, receive a slight incentive from the state for getting that homestead approval, which means there are around 1,900 households within the township that do not meet that homestead criteria for one reason or another. Typically, those would be individuals who rent or those who own multiple households and their primary residence is elsewhere. Within those total households, 2,096 have at least one student enrolled in our district. And as you can see within that table, the breakdown of how many different households, how many different numbers of students attend our district, one student being the most popular at nearly half, with 998 households sending one student only. So why did I want to look at that? The reason was for both the scale of South Fayette Township and our school district, but also to provide context as we look at what a median household in the township is paying in terms of taxes. So to quickly take you through this calculation, the median assessed value of properties within the township is $168,500. This is an amount determined by Allegheny County when reviewing our district data. So it's important to remember this is an assessed value, not market value. And since I know that always raises questions, I did want to run through that quickly. Essentially, to show the difference, you take the assessed value of $168,500 and use what is called the Allegheny County common level ratio of 50.14%. You use that to determine what the estimate of the market value would be. So just to make sure again that we understand what this means, at 50.14% common level ratio, that means that essentially a house would be assessed at 50.14% of its market value. This is necessary because Allegheny County has not done reassessment of properties since 2012, and market values at that point are significantly different from market values today. But it also allows for quite a bit of gamesmanship with regard to assessed values, and is why regular reassessments are important to the region's stability and something we are hopeful we will see in the near future. So with that all said, a median household of South Fayette has an estimated market value of just over $336,000, an assessed value of $168,500, and if they are an approved homestead, as I discussed in the previous slide, they also receive a slight reduction in their tax bill, which is where the state's homestead reduction funding comes in. So that person, with the market value as indicated, is being taxed at an approximate amount of $160,016. And using our existing millage, their tax owed to the district for this year would be $4,432.44. And I want to highlight at the bottom because it's also crucial to note the state certified tuition rate for South Fayette Township School District. Every year, the State Department of Education reviews all district financial data and determines the cost attributed directly to the education of an individual student at both the elementary and secondary levels. A district's actual cost per student is notably higher because PDE's calculation excludes areas like debt service and certain other non-instructional costs. This tuition rate is meant to give an approximation of what it would cost to add an individual student to a district. You'll note that this number at both the elementary and secondary level is more than 3 times the amount we would expect to receive in real estate from the median household in the township. So when we see long-term enrollment increases, this math is where at times it can become complicated as we look at continuing to support enrollment growth, especially when you are supporting that enrollment growth, but are not seeing continued significant increases in terms of overall real estate growth across the township. So as we went through this budget process, we also began looking at what some other districts are doing. I regularly shown the chart on the next slide that shows the districts around us in terms of millage, but I know many of those districts are not ones we typically would compare ourselves against. And in some ways, they have very different circumstances. So instead, I went through a 10-year history of where the top 5 performing school districts in the county have been in terms of millage, and also looked at our spending compared to those. So those other 4 districts up there are Upper St. Clair, Mount Lebanon, Hampton, and Fox Chapel. Going back 10 years, our millage rate was higher than those, but in the years since then, we did not raise taxes until this past year, and the other districts had several years of tax increases. Though we are now in the middle of these districts in terms of millage, as each has evolved, we have only increased our millage by 1 mil in the last decade, while Upper St. Clair and Mount Lebanon have raised theirs over 7 mils each, both of them passing us in terms of overall millage, and Hampton has increased theirs 5.53 mils, and Fox Chapel just over 3. Additionally, Upper St. Clair and Mount Lebanon have already voted to raise their millage rate for next school year, as indicated at the bottom of the page. I also wanted to highlight the last row in gray on the table, the cost per student. Unlike the last slide, this figure is based on a district's entire general fund expenses and is published every year by the state. Our district is the lowest in terms of these 5 districts in terms of cost per student, just barely ahead of Mount Lebanon and significantly ahead of the other 3. While we are working internally to control our spending and live within our budget, it's also worthwhile to note that among peer districts, our spending is lower. As referenced, this is the chart of the upper half of millage rates. There are a few districts, I didn't flip to the next slide. So as referenced, this is the chart of the upper half of millage rates. There are a few districts in the right-hand notes that have already made decisions about millage rates for next year, but many are voting this week and next week on their final budgets. Again, I know I've shown this slide before about the impact of millage. I did add a column in here, as I mentioned the common level ratio earlier, showing the estimated market value for each of these levels of assessed property value. Again, I want to stress the common level ratio is an overall guideline, that it may not always line up exactly when comparing market value to assessments. I added some additional scenarios within our millage options for consideration here, and what the impact would be on the overall budget at each level, with expenditures remaining the same in each scenario and only the real estate revenue changing. So finally, I wanted to touch on what's next as we look at our district's financials. As we've discussed during the budget process, we do have some long-range financial concerns we need to address internally. I believe we began taking steps during this budget process, but Dr. Miller and I have discussed the follow-up to those steps and possible measures we're going to consider, and will provide updates throughout the next year to the board on these potential considerations. Regarding staffing, we will look closely at the necessity of open positions and at what is being paid for additional work within the district and how we are deploying our substitutes. We also will look at purchasing habits and consider the potential for delaying or removing certain items from our district's purchasing if appropriate. Finally, we will look closely at travel, professional development within the district and evaluate its necessity and look for grant opportunities to support these initiatives and other district initiatives where possible. We also will look closely at revenue generation, and if there are ways to support the district in different ways than we've traditionally worked here at South Fayette. But in the longer term, we also will work on a district-wide staffing analysis, including benchmarking against other districts and against enrollment realities, as well as the staffing and other expenditure implications of our programs. We will review our transportation and facilities plans and consider strategies around revenue and benchmarking against other districts for ways we can improve our processes and ensure sustainable excellence for our district. All right, so with all that said, this is the final step of my budget presentation. I thank the board for the considerable time and effort you've put into this process. And at this time, if there are questions, I'm happy to address those. Yes, sir.
I have a few questions and comments. First of all, a comment. Thank you for this presentation. It was very thorough and very detailed. I appreciate it. I particularly appreciate the last 2 pages on administrative steps to help reduce or expenditures or eliminate the budget deficit. So the first question I have is, has there been any change in the budget? I don't have last month's presentation. Has there been any change since last month in the numbers here?
Yes, so last month, I'll go to the very big, the last time we briefed the board, the public meeting, the top line there, the budget deficit was $6.554 million, the upper right-hand corner.
Okay,
Since then, we've made all the adjustments listed, and we currently sit at $6.138 million in deficit.
okay, thank you. Second question, going to page 12, I think it is slide 12. Fund balance summary, maybe that's not 12. It's 16, I'm sorry, 16.
Okay.
Second line, projected deficit for the 25-26 year. Do we have any better handle on what the actual is going to be at this point in time?
That's where I currently project it. Certainly I'm being conservative with that. I'm hopeful we'll see some developments that improve it. But that is, I stand by that projection for the moment.
When do you get the final number from the auditors? Is that later in the,
It'll be probably early October.
okay.
I'd also add too that by August, we are close. Like before the start of next school year, we'll have our own internal numbers. The auditor always has adjustments and different things they'll make, but those don't usually have a huge impact on the budget. So I would say by August, when we've wrapped up all accounts payable, all payroll outstanding items, we'll have a what we call a trial balance to present to the auditor. And I can certainly share that with the board at that time if it's requested.
Thank you.
Help.
So one more comment and one more question. The comment is certainly no matter what millage number the board chooses to use tonight, the fact that things are included in the budget doesn't mean we have to spend them, right? And so your charge and the whole district's charge as we go forward is to make sure that we are not spending things that we don't need to spend, even if it's in the budget.
Absolutely.
So in line with that, I'm going to ask you if you can do something for the board, because I'm curious about this. And perhaps this is a very simple request, I think, perhaps on a quarterly basis to just give us a running estimate of where we stand. So you can just take for the year, the total expenses total revenues, break it down by 4. And at the end of the first quarter, how do we stack up against what our projections are, actual versus projected? Same with expenses. It doesn't have to be very detailed. At least it would help me in understanding as we go forward through the months of the year, where we stand on revenues and expenses. So as we make decisions further down the road, we have that in the back of our mind instead of waiting until the end of the year to find out we overspent or underspent by this amount, or the revenues were less than we thought. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. Something we've kicked around, ways we can show a forecast to the board, and we will absolutely have that in place.
And it's not even necessarily a forecast. It's just, here's what the estimate was for the entire year. Here's what the estimate was for the quarter. Here's what the actual was. And these are the reasons why we met it or didn't meet it. That's all. Very simple.
Absolutely. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Neely, thank you for all of the work, and thank you to all of the administrators that put together budgets throughout this budget season. I do have some questions, some clarifications, if you'd be so kind. Definitely, I have some concerns about continuing to use the fund balance in order to balance the budget each year, with that number rising each year. So looking at that, if we could go to slide 7. And that was the comparison of cost increases. So I just doing calculations. I'm at the 4.2, just like you, 4.198. So it's even a little bit less than that. But is it fair to say that some of that increase, and I know some of this is construction based, but some of this stems from healthcare increases perhaps from agreements that were put into place in the previous budget year. But ultimately, if you had to say what's the largest bit of this direct or this increase, what is it a direct consequence of? Is it enrollments over the last, are we just seeing the effects now of decisions that were made 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years in terms of residential growth, requiring construction? Is this, what is the number one pull force of that 4.2% increase?
Yeah, it's absolutely construction. It's the need for additional educational buildings within the district, additional educational space. The debt service, as we've shown the board previously, it's a multi-year increase that we'll have to continue to look at. It won't be an increase that keeps going forever, but while we are in the bond issuing process, those numbers will continue to grow. Within our day-to-day operations, I think certainly you've heard from some different department and school heads about, the cost of everything going up. You've heard from transportation, from student services, from, a couple of our schools, from countless other, I think, department heads that have seen that the cost of things they bought once upon a time is 10, 15, 20% or more from what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so, we are working our best to constrain the budget with those realities while still providing what our students need.
Thank you. Additional follow-up questions. Also on slide 7, looking at that 4.2%, I find that interesting because last week, I think it was last week, didn't the report come out about CPI, Consumer Price Index, and I believe it was 4.2%.
Correct. Yes, they were there was 4.2%, just like our budget increase.
So looking at that, so I think it's fair to say that every taxpayer in the community, all of us around the table, everybody in the room feels the impact of rising prices. But is it also an accurate statement as the district, and you just alluded to this fact, as the district is making purchases, whether it's paper towels, whether it's fuel, whatever it may be that the district needs for operations of the school district, that is also just as we are feeling the impacts of those rising prices, the district is as well. Is that accurate?
That is 100% accurate. Again, I mentioned a couple examples, but a couple more that come to mind. We've heard our maintenance department talk about the cost of getting a professional in here to perform a service, to perform a repair. Those numbers are through the roof. I believe when Mark Keener was up here talking athletics, when our teams go to the States, and our teams go to the States a lot, getting a bus is about double what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago for those same exact trips that that our teams love to take, and we love to support them, and we will continue to do it. But we definitely have to navigate the affordability of those items.
And if you will, can you just give a very simplistic view of what that CPI means in terms of, if these numbers match, how do they actually interact?
That's essentially a metric that shows the how much the price of goods in a wide span of the economy have gone up in terms of cost year over year. It's sort of a marker that goes along with inflation, a measurement of it. It's essentially a quick explanation of it.
Thank you. Additional question, and I'm sorry I don't have the slide number. I know you had it up, talking about the average assessed value.
Yes.
I believe I asked this last year, but for refresher, can you please explain the difference between Allegheny County's assessed value versus a market value?
So the market value is essentially what a house would sell for, an estimate, if it were on the market right now. Because Allegheny County has not reassessed since 2012, there are plenty of old assessments that have been sitting out there untouched for a very long time. They have what they call the common level ratio, which essentially tries to equate the market value of today to the assessments that were levied in 2012. Every year they adjust that number lower. It is currently at 50.14%, which means that a house or a property assessed in this example at $168,500, the estimated market value of that house would probably be around $336,000, just about double. As I mentioned in my presentation, that also leads to some gamesmanship with people or with companies or organizations, or in some case individuals who find different ways to take advantage of that system. and why it's important to have assessments more often than every 15 plus years.
So is it safe to assume then, looking at what you just shared and listening to your explanation, let's just say a house that was built in the district in 2022, 2023, $500,000 home, is probably not, because of common level ratio, not assessed at that value?
Correct. It would be significantly less. It wouldn't be quite as low as 50.14 because it's a 4-year-old house, but it would probably be 54% of that value, just to give you a quick estimate of what the common level ratio probably was at that point.
Right. Also staying on the slide, thank you. I appreciate you sharing the tuition rates from PDE for elementary and secondary students. Just for my own sake of clarification here. So I also assume it's safe to assume that the average median household in a district, and I think you said this earlier, does not necessarily cover the cost of one student, let alone if there are multiple children in that household.
That is correct. You can see it right here. The median household, based on just the straight math of it, will contribute about $4,400 in real estate tax. The basically additional cost for one extra student in one of our buildings, you can see in the lower left-hand corner there, for elementary and secondary.
Okay, and then a tangent line off of that then, because I hear conversations in the community, you know, there's all this residential growth. Why aren't taxes going down? With the increased residential growth, it puts more of a fiscal strain instead of fiscal elasticity on the district. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's a challenge we have to navigate. I mean, we want the students, we want the enrollment, we want the students, we want the township to continue to grow and thrive and succeed. But it does create, especially when we were seeing consistent 3% and 4% real estate value growth in the township, we were able to, I think, stay ahead of this. But now that it has dropped, previous slide, you know, below 2% 2 years ago, 0.5% this year, we aren't seeing that real estate growth keep up with the additional enrollment of students. And so while we welcome them, we want to be the place where people want to bring their kids. It does create some challenges we have to figure out how to navigate.
All right. Now, I'm sorry for asking so many questions,
No, this is great.
but looking at slide 17 now, I know it's not quantifiable necessarily on this slide, and this may be a question for Dr. Miller, Dr. Deichler, maybe if Dr. Oliver's on the call. But in Dr. Oliver's support service budget presentation, she shared that there are increasing needs and increasing numbers of students that are being identified with IEPs, 504 plans, GIEPs, mental health needs, rising needs throughout the school district. Dr. Miller, if you would be so kind, would you be able to share how does that necessarily become quantifiable in terms of a budgetary impact?
So we have in the past several years found ourselves having more students identified specifically with autism, our students in life skills programs, emotional support, and we have seen learning support students in those specific four areas. With that, we don't have a choice. When a team meets and they look at what the student needs, it is not an option, and we aren't able to say we can't afford or that there is a cost barrier. We need to provide what the student deserves and what that team identifies. So if that's an alternative placement, that alternative placement may be a placement that costs $30,000 to $40,000 per year, in addition to the transportation. And oftentimes it's specialized transportation. So we could be looking at one student needing, and when we're looking at all of the specialized services, looking upwards way over $50,000. Now, that's not every student, but we also have requirements in terms of class size. And so when we're looking at different types of support, there are class limitations for certain groups of students to receive those supports. Therefore, then you're looking at additional staff. Specifically in this budget, you'll see that there is a request for us to have another emotional support teacher. At the intermediate school, we had an elementary we asked for an elementary emotional support teacher last year. And that was provided for us. And we're seeing that those students now are moving into the intermediate school, and we need to provide those similar services for our students. So it really becomes outside placement, additional services, and some students have very complex needs, be it with services in terms of occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. We might see nursing needs. You have the alternative placements, but then even within, when it might not be as complex of a need, and we're able to support them here in the school district, it often is a need for staffing.
So just to summarize, it's twofold. It's doing what's best for the student, and some of these budgetary decisions or some of the budgetary impact, it's federally mandated or
Correct.
state mandated.
Yes,
You
sir.
have to do it.
Yes.
Slide 20. Really appreciate this. These are often the districts that South Fayette gets compared to. So appreciate you putting that up there. Another clarification, all those 26.7 and then one jump to 27.7. So you're telling me that the district has increased taxes one time over the last decade?
That is correct.
And even with looking at that, South Fayette's cost per student is the lowest of those five.
Yes.
Okay. With an increased residential growth rate probably beyond those other districts.
I think that's very safe to assume. Yes. I don't have that on here, but
Okay.
I just think that's safe to assume.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you very much.
I have a follow-up question, if I can, please. Are we still locked in on a fuel contract for the remainder of this year, or do we have to get another contract through the
For diesel?
consortium?
For diesel or for which type of fuel are you talking?
Okay, for both. Don't we get
So-
fuel contracts for both gas and diesel for the,
Our diesel contract I know is locked in through next year. Brandon locked that in, I believe, in February. I'm not sure, Brandon, if you're online or not, but
I saw his face up there before.
I am online. Yes, sir.
So
And yes, we did lock it in. I don't have the number right in front of me, but I can pull it up here. It's very similar to what we're paying this current year for next year. It was a good price. I was very happy with it personally.
And what about gasoline?
We do not lock in gasoline because we currently don't have a gasoline tank. It is included in the upcoming construction, but currently we don't have a gasoline tank. So we buy that off the rack, which is just buying at a gas station, local gas station.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, Ryan.
Sure.
First, thank you for the presentations. Did a great job. Couple questions / comments. I'm wondering, projecting this out, because I think we're looking at this right now under the lens of this year and what to do this year as far as tax increase is concerned. But I think projecting it out, even with a maximum tax increase, you're probably going to have a projected budget deficit next year in the $7 to $9 million range.
certainly that's possible. We want to, do our work this summer, I think, and start looking at some of those staffing items we talked about, healthcare items I talked about, and see what we can do as far as those. But that is certainly a complicating challenge for us. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I appreciate what's going to be looked at to hopefully cut some costs, but I do think we have to start thinking about a long-term plan too, knowing costs are only going to go up, and we're still functioning in a deficit. That's a huge concern to me. That even with a maximum tax increase, we're still talking about a $5 million. So in other words, if that trend continues, in 2 more years, our
Fund balance.
fund balance gonna be in half.
We'd be in trouble for sure. That's why we're starting to take steps now as much as we can to see where we can navigate this.
Okay, that's all. Usually I like to project out what this looks like over 5 years. Because I think people, like I said, and the public's going to look at this, what are you doing this year? But they need to know, like, what we saw from 2016 to 17 to 2024, 25. That's not going to be feasible
Mhm.
given the situation, even though we'd like it to be, I'd certainly like it to be. It's not going to be. So I think trying to give some sort of vision of here's the challenges that we face, here's how we're going to attack them, might help. The other thing I want to do is I understand those academically, achievement wise, those districts are what we're often compared against.
Mhm.
And I know this for a fact because I did it. That was 4 years ago. If you actually do an analysis, we're not comparable to those districts in demographic information. Academically, we might be, we are. But if you look at medium household income, property values, level of education of people living in the district, we're not anywhere near those districts. Like it's a different, those are a different tier. So I just want to point that out because that information is important too. Like we're exceeding, I guess, what our projected achievement and success would be.
No, that makes sense. I understand what you're saying. We are a pretty unique district as far as composition, I think. So,
Yeah.
Finding comparables, it depends on the lens you look at it, but I take your point that some of those districts have kind of been established in their structure for a while. So us, as we kind of grow and develop, we do look different, certainly.
Yeah.
So, comment and sort of question. That's still, with budget deficit and this decreased fund balance, which quickly decreasing. I know you've got some administrative steps already set up to help close this budget. We all know the budget's not sustainable the way it is. And we're gonna need to tighten all things. We need to be critical of every purchase, new hires and agreements so that we can help close this budget gap. And that's for school board administration. Taxpayers are gonna be part of this, teachers, everybody. So everybody just needs to be aware. We also know that this was basically brought around from construction, of all the residential. It's a hand we were all dealt, and we're gonna have to all work together to help close this budget up. It's gonna take a few years, but I think we'll be able to handle it.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
So to put you on the spot, I know you already sat down. What is your recommendation then for this year?
So my recommendation, after careful consideration, reviewing everything we presented tonight, driven in large part by the construction, the ongoing building projects, would be an increase to the full Act 1 index.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation. All right, we're gonna have 3 items on the consent agenda for today. Do we have any residents and or taxpayers to speak on any items on the agenda? All right, the superintendent's monthly report, Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. As administrators, we are often asked what we do all summer. It's one of my favorite questions. And so our summer work is centered on ensuring that South Fayette enters into the 26-27 school year with strong systems for student support, safety, communication, instructional excellence, and operational consistency. Collectively, we will be engaging in some of the following tasks among a myriad of the other responsibilities that each administrator is responsible for. So some of the things that we're doing this summer is 1, review and analyze student, parent, and staff survey data to identify trends, inform priorities for the coming school year. We are also strengthening student safety, behavioral health, and crisis response systems. That includes safety and behavioral audit, threat assessment review, suicide prevention planning, and an update to crisis procedures and discipline processes. We're finalizing district handbooks, policies, and administrative expectations for the coming year, refining discipline systems and student accountability structures by reviewing discipline flowcharts, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and establishing consistent expectations across buildings. Also looking at advanced prevention, mental health, and student support initiatives through the development of prevention plans, reviewing our SAP team processes, a review of our SEL resources, chill room expectations, and the like. We're also developing and finalizing professional learning plans for the 26-27 school year, evaluating and strengthening our instructional programs and practices across all buildings. We are also enhancing family engagement and communication strategies by establishing key messaging for parents at events, improving Parent Square implementation, communicating important student wellness topics, and ensuring consistent communication practices across schools. We're also preparing district operations and staff supports for successful school opening. That includes Mr. Radich reviewing best practices in HR with our administration, reviewing staff expectations and documentation, paraprofessional onboarding, construction-related planning, emergency preparedness drills, and safety training for all of our employees. Of course, summer always includes recruitment and hiring as critical tasks, as we do for all departments for openings that we need to fill. And then, of course, as you heard from Mr. Neely, reviewing areas for continued cost reductions so that we can close the deficit that we just discussed. In addition, our leadership team was engaged in our annual operational planning professional development last week. We came in on Monday, started the week already fully engaged in the work that I just shared. So we're very busy, and I'm just very proud to be learning and leading with the team that we've established here in our administration. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Business office, we have 6 items, all for today. There any questions, comments on anything in the business office? I think that's part of the motion, isn't it?
You could actually discuss it now if anybody wants to make a recommendation. We're not voting on it
We're
now,
not
but we
voting on it yet, but yeah, we can,
could do that.
we could have a discussion about a proposal to fill in the blanks, and then we can come back to it after we do public comment.
Do we want to fill that in? Or are we going to go with Mr. Neely's recommendation for the index? There.
Mr. Neely, I fear, I'm just going to jump in with another question. I assume that all state and federal resources have been exhausted in terms of what subsidies exist in order to combat any deficit.
Correct. We keep as close an eye on those as we can. If there's something out there, we're gonna look and try to find it.
I say we go with Mr. Neely's recommendation.
Consensus? prior to vote consensus.
If you will, Mr. Neely, take us down the road if we did not do that. What does this school year look like? What do future school years look like in terms of programmatic changes?
If there was no tax increase at all, if we stayed at the existing millage, I think tomorrow morning, Dr. Miller, Dr. Deichler and I would probably be putting our heads together on what can we look at right here, right now to start making some adjustments within our district budget. And, you know, what are the things we can control in this instant? And even then, as we didn't get on this road too much tonight, but as we've said in prior meetings, you know, once you don't raise those tax increase, you know, those tax rates in 1 year, you don't get that money back. And so it's, you know, the tax increase now provides additional funds next year, the year after, the year after, the year after. So, you know, it really does have, you know, Mr. Galani mentioned about long-term forecasting, having that security, having that increase would be a crucial part of a healthier long-term forecast for the district.
Do you have an idea of where that cut would come from
If there was no tax increase,
if there was none?
top of my head, I do not. Dr. Miller, I don't know if you have.
Could you, and this was in our previous slide deck. When we look at the pie chart, I know you have included the revenue, and I'm sorry to ask you to go back to a previous slide, but expenditures. So if we're looking at expenditures, most of our costs are in our greatest resource, and that is our people, right? And along with people, even though there are salaries associated, there are also benefits in addition. So when we're looking at, there's a salary, but then there's also a lot of the benefits, and those are all costs associated. I think that to answer your question very honestly, the first thing that I would be looking at tomorrow morning is what positions would we not fill? What classes would we not run? What programs would we be looking at either now or in the future, in the near future? What would those programs look like? What are the extracurricular activities that absolutely impact students, which is the last thing that none of these are what I want for our students, what I want for our district. But if you're asking me if we have to make serious decisions, we can talk about pencils and erasers, and we can talk about binders. We can talk about those types of things. That's not going to close the gap. That's not going to do it. So we will need to make some very serious choices in terms of where do we fill positions, and where do we continue programs, discontinue programs. And I don't have even a starting point for where that would be, but those are the questions that I would ask of myself and our team in order to make some very serious recommendations to the board. And none of them will make me happy. None of them feel good. And they're not ones that I necessarily like or want to support. But if we have to be fiscally responsible and financial stewards of the district, then I can't come back to you without possible solutions. And unfortunately, when we're looking at expenditures, as I said, our greatest resource is the people, but that is also our greatest expense.
So is it fair to say in summary, that would be not pursuing that index? We're looking at potential position cuts, changing in offerings, increased class sizes, all of that potentially. In other words, it has a negative instructional impact on students and their families. Is that a fair statement?
I think I would couch it by saying I owe it to the board, and our team owes it to the board to consider all of the things that you just said and make recommendations based on that. And that we would explore that together. But I think we would, I have the approach of leave no stone unturned. So I think yes, but they would be recommendations and exploration at that point.
Rob, could you put slide 22 up, please? So I just wanted to draw attention back to this slide because no one is for raising taxes, and I know we're all going to get emails and nobody wants to do that. But I think it's important before the emails come that people look at this slide and look at the monthly increase and the annual increase before I think it sounds sometimes more daunting than it is, but I know that my utilities, every single thing has gone up. And I think that's just we're all facing in a lot of aspects of our lives. So when you look at it this way, I think our kids are worth the monthly increase and just keeping, again, we're still going to have a deficit, but I just know that this was a really important slide to me to see that what the increase is going to be for each thing. And it's not as big when you look at it in smaller doses. If you look at the monthly increase and the annual increase, instead of just thinking, oh, my taxes are going to go up this percentage. So I just wanted to draw attention to this slide just for people that are inevitably going to send emails.
Yeah, I think the bad part is we're like the last one on the pile. Utilities have gone up 20% already. You're already feeling that. You've county, you already felt that in your increase in your mortgage. This is like we're the last one jumping on the pile. But the reality is, I have to tell you, as someone who's sat where you're sitting, that number makes me really, really anxious. I don't know, Mr. Fernell, can you remember a time that since you've been on the board, since you're the historian of the board, that the district's been in this big of a deficit? But I think growth is always carried through.
But I can tell you that there was a time many years ago when the fund balance, and I said this a couple of months ago, the fund balance went down to, believe it or not, $28,000. And I never want to see that happen again. And so that's why I raised the issue several months ago about the fact that this is not sustainable. We can't keep burning through the fund balance. And you raised that issue before, Mike, about the fact that we need to start doing something about it. So even if we don't raise the millage, the projected deficit is 8.1 million. If we raise to the index, it's 6.1 million. It's still a large deficit. So the issue of cost control is going to be important this year, next year, and the year after. And so nobody wants to eliminate programs. Nobody wants to eliminate staff. But as we are moving forward, all of those things as they come up need to be looked at very seriously. We don't have the luxury anymore of saying, oh, we needed 3 extra teachers. Let's just hire them. We need to add this program or that program. Let's just do it. It's not that simple anymore. Again, I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody knows that, but we didn't raise taxes for probably 10 years, Ryan?
Correct. 10 years.
And that's chicken has come home to roost, I guess is the way to say it right now. So.
And I can tell you, Joe, once you start down that slope, it's one of the reasons I got out of education. It's a big reason is the budgeting is because I've had to sit there and furlough people and I've had to cut programs in districts. It's not fun and trying to avoid that. Still some of that's going to have to happen. Not that drastic, but I think we almost have to, I support Esther and the tax increase that Ryan suggested. I think we have to.
And Mike, my question was hypothetical.
Yeah.
Of paint a picture of.
It's not fun. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Like Rebecca said, none of us want our taxes to go up, but we also don't want to see the school fall apart. So if we look at this slide, like Rebecca suggested, we can handle $10 a month. It makes it much easier to swallow. And it just needs done.
So I guess my final comment is that we're a product of our own success. We're in this position because our academic profile has been elevated so much in the last 20 years that more and more people moved in. More and more developments, new houses were built, more and more students came into the district. All of that raised costs. And as you see in the slide, one house doesn't cover the cost. The taxes from one house don't cover the cost of educating one student. So that's the dilemma we faced. We're successful. We're extremely successful. We're a community and a school district where people want to move because they want their kids in our school system, but inevitably that raises the costs. So unfortunately, we are where we are.
All right, so I'm gonna fill in here with the index. Yep. All right. So is there any other questions in the business office? Do I need to read it in now with the,
Why don't you give everybody the numbers now, just so
Okay.
then somebody can read it?
all right, so this will be 80 million, the budget revenue of $80,400,408. Expenses of $86,538,444. A 28.9465 millage rate, and borrowing from the fund balance in the amount of $6,138,036.
If you're looking for any of those numbers, it's on slide 23 in your packet. It might be helpful to just double check whoever's going to read that motion in. So the first number, 80,408. Expenditures, 86,538,444. Deficit, 6,138,036. And a millage of 28.9465. Of course.
All right. Anything else on the business office before we move ahead? All right, personnel, we have 15 items for today. Dr. Miller, can you help me with those?
Of course, under item 1, it's approval to renew Athletic Director Mark Keener for a term from this July until June 30th, 2031. Item 2 is a contract renewal for Director of Communications, Jen Donovan, beginning this July through June 30th, 2031. Item 3 is to hire Crystal Morton as Elementary School Administrative Assistant. And that would be retroactive to June 1 with an increase in compensation for $13.50 annually prorated for being the lead administrative assistant. Item 4 is approval of student teachers. That's Point Park University ABCTE program, Brooke Smith, Middlebury College student, Georgia Beatty, LaRoche University student, Kali Kaminsky. Item 5 is a recommendation for leaves of absence for custodian Carla Amatrout and first grade teacher Ashley Haru. Item 6 is approval to hire Grant Jones as paraeducator for the ESY program this summer at a rate of $22.80, max 5 hours per day. Item 7 is approval for an EPR that would be a retroactive motion for middle school talent show for Austin March. Item 8 is approval for the following reappointments, and that would be for school board treasurer for Mr. Neely at a stipend of $1,500 prorated. Item B is for Tucker Arnsberg as our school district solicitor, with Chris Volz being the lead, with the rates remaining the same as they have been since 2018, 2019. Item 9 is approval for the salary increases for administrators and non-union support staff for the 26-27 school year, beginning July 1. Item 10 is approval to hire Abigail Russell as intermediate school assistant principal at a rate of $75,000 effective June 17th, 2026. Ms. Russell is currently our interim intermediate school assistant principal. Item 11 is approval for Millersville University student Rachel Young to complete her clinical rotation with 2 of our school nurses for the first semester. Item 12 is a recommendation for resignations. They include Director of Aquatics, Gianna Baburka, High School English Teacher, Michelle Laquette, High School Paraeducator, Lisa Sweeney, Middle School Head Cross Country Coach, Mara Whalen, Middle School Family and Consumer Science Teacher, Alexandra Torres, Intermediate School Counselor, Amber Greenwood. Item 13 is a correction to the EPR rate from $46.50 to $48 for the 2026 summer STEAM and elementary and intermediate school summer STEAM camp personnel. Item 14 is a recommendation to hire Hannah Feinstone as the Director of Aquatics, retro to June 8th, 2026 at a rate of $18.50 per hour. Item 15 is a recommendation to approve the hiring of Lynette Lortz as Coordinator of Instructional Technology at a rate or a salary of $85,000 effective August 3rd, 2026.
Thank you. There any questions in personnel? Questions, comments? We're gonna have one item in education for today. There will be nothing in transportation or athletics, and one item in construction. One item in miscellaneous. Was there any questions on any of those last 2?
Question on construction. The new furniture. I know you sent the quote. That's for the new classrooms. Is that
Correct.
okay? Yes.
Mr. Gray, I was remiss in not just for the minutes identifying that we had 5 educators who have fulfilled all of their requirements in Pennsylvania for tenure. So whereas that's not something that's voted on, just want to announce that. So we're very excited to say that tenure has been achieved by Chloe Hall, Ashley Haru, Jessica Kent, Chad Warner, and RJ West for minutes purposes.
Thank you. All right. We'll suspend to hear from any residents or taxpayers. Going back to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the 3 items on the consent agenda? Moved by Rebecca. Second by Tom. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Business office. Do I have a motion to approve 1 through 5 in business office? Moved by Mike. Second by Rebecca. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries for 1 through 5. All right, so do I have a motion to approve item 6? The superintendent and director of finance, Ryan Neely, recommend board approval to adopt the final budget for the 2026-2027 school year. The final budget revenue of $80,400,408 and expenses of $86,538,444 with a balance will balance with a 28.9465 millage rate and borrowing from the fund balance in the amount of $6,138,036. And Moved by Esther. Second by Mike. Susan, can you help us out with a roll call?
Mike? Mike? Yes. Rebecca? Len?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Esther?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes. All right, motion carries. Personnel. The 15 items. Do I have a motion to approve 1 through 15 in personnel? Moved by Rebecca. Second by Esther. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah.
We have Ms. Russell here with us this evening, so congratulations and welcome. Or you're already here, but we're excited to have you officially. Would you like to share a few words with the board?
Yes, I would. I want to thank you guys so much. Thank you. I'm extremely honored and grateful to be here today and for this opportunity. I appreciate the support and the guidance that I've received along my journey here. I've already learned and grown so much in this position, and I'm so excited to continue to learn and to grow and to make this district and the community proud. So thank you.
Thank you. Education, there is one item, or a motion to approve item 1 in education. Moved by Rebecca. Second by Tom, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Nothing in transportation, nor athletics, construction. We have one item. Do I have a motion to approve number 1 in construction?
So moved.
Moved by Joe. Second by Lynn, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. In miscellaneous, we have a second reading of policy 819, suicide awareness, prevention and response. I believe that's it. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting? Moved by Rebecca,
Second.
second by Joe.